Good morning, brothers and sisters, ladies and gentlemen, students, scholars, teachers, trainers, professors, professionals, officers, officials, listeners, learners. I welcome all respected groups and directors. I welcome all honorable ministers, managers. I welcome all admirable advocates, suppliers, and district advisors. I welcome the most honorable President Mr. Modi ji. Dr. Keshav University, heartily cordially welcome. It's really nice time, nice place, nice action that we are defining English literature, the shell and the book. A child and a man were one day walking on the seashore when the child found a little shell and held it to his ear. Suddenly, he heard sound strange, low, melodious sounds, as if the shell were remembering and repeating to itself the murmurs of its ocean home. The child face filled with wonder as he listened. There in the little shell, apparently, was a voice from another world, and he listened with delight to its mystery and music. Then came the man explaining that the child heard nothing strange, that the clearly curves of the shell simply caught a multitude of sounds too faint for human ears and filled the glimmering hollows with the murmur of innumerable echoes. It was not a new word, but only the unnoticed harmony of the old that had aroused the child's wonder. Some such experience as this awaits us when we begin the study of literature, which has always two aspects, one of simple enjoyment and appreciation, the other of analysis and exact description. Let a little song appeal to the ear, or a noble book to the heart, and for the moment at least, we discover a few new words, words so different from our own that seems a place of dreams and magic. To enter and enjoy this new world, to love good books for their own sake is the chief thing. To analyze and explain them is a less joyous, but still an important matter. Behind every book is a man. Behind the man is the race. And behind the race are the natural and social environments whose influence is unconsciously reflected. These also we must know if the book is to speak its whole message. In a word, we have now reached a point where we wish to understand as well as to enjoy literature. And the first step And the first step, since exact definition is impossible, is to determine some of its essential qualities. Qualities of literature. The first significant thing is the essentially artistic quality of all literature. All art is the expression of life in forms of truth and beauty, or rather, it is the reflection of some truth and beauty which are in the world, but which remain unnoticed until brought to our attention by some sensitive human soul, just as the delicate curves of the shell reflect sounds and harmonies too faint to be otherwise noticed. 100 men may pass a hayfield and see only the sweety toil and the windrows of dried grass. But here is one who passes by a Romanian meadow where girls are making hay and singing as they walk. He looks deeper, sees truth and beauty where we see only dead grass. And he reflects what he sees in a little poem in which the hay tells its own story. Yesterday's flowers am I, and I have drunk my last sweat draught of dew. Young maidens came and sang me to my death. The moon looks down and sees me in my shroud, the shroud of my last dew. Yesterday's flowers that are yet in me must needs make way for all tomorrow's flowers. The maidens too that sang me to my death must even so make way for all the maids that are to come, and as my soul, so too their soul will be, laden with fragrance of the days gone by. The maidens that tomorrow come this way will not remember that I once did bloom, for they will only see the new-born flowers. Yet will my perfume-laden soul bring back, as a sweet memory to women's hearts, their days of maidenhood, and then they will be sorry that they came to sing me to my death, and all the butterflies all will mourn for me. I bear away with me the sunshine, the dear remembrance, and the low, soft murmurs of the spring. My breathing sweet as children's prattle is. I drank in whole earth's fruitfulness to make of it the fragrance of my soul that shall outlive by my death. One who reads only that first exquisite line, yesterday's flowers am I, can never again see hay without recalling the beauty that was hidden from his eyes until the poet found it. In the same pleasing, surprising way. All artistic work must be a kind of revelation. Yet we still have many builders, but few architects. That is, men whose work in wood or stone suggests some hidden truth and beauty to the human senses. So, in literature, which is the art that expresses life in words, that appeal to our own sense of the beautiful, we have many writers, but few artists. But few artists, in the broadest sense, perhaps literature means simply the written records of the race, including all its history and sciences, as well as its poems and novels. In the narrower sense, literature is an artistic record of life, and most of our writing is excluded from it, just as the mass of our buildings were mere shelters from storm and from cold, are excluded from architecture. A history or a work of science may be, and sometimes in literature, but only as we forget the subject matter and the presentation of facts in the simple beauty of its expression. The second quality of literature is its suggestiveness, its appeal to our emotions and imagination rather than to our intellect. It is not so much what it says as it awakens in us that constitutes its charm. When Milton makes Saturn say, myself am hell, he does not state any fact, but rather opens up in these three tremendous words a whole world of speculation and imagination. When Festus is the when Festus in the presence of Helen asks, was this the face that launched a thousand shapes? He does not state a fact or expect an answer. He opened a door through which our imagination entered a new world, a world of music, love, beauty, heroism, the whole splendid world of Greek literature. Such image, such magic is in words. When Shakespeare describes the young Byron as speaking in such apt and gracious words that aged years play truant at his tales. He has unconsciously given not only an excellent description of himself, but the manner of all literature, which makes us play truant with the present word and run away to live a while in the pleasant realm of fancy. The province of all art is not to instruct but to delight, and only as literature delights us, causing each reader to build in his own soul that lordly, pleasant house of which Tennyson dreamed in his palace of art. Is it worthy of its name? The third characteristic of literature, arising directly from the other two, is its permanence. The world does not live by bread alone, notwithstanding its hurry and bustle and apparent absorption in material things. It does not willingly let any beautiful thing perish. This is even more true of its songs than of its painting and sculpture, though permanence is a quality we should hardly expect in the present deluge of books and magazines pouring day and night from our presses in the name of literature. But this problem of too many books is not modern, as we suppose. It has been a problem ever since Caxton brought the first printing from Flanders. From 100 years ago, and in the shadow of Westminster Abbey, opened his little shop and advertised his wares as wooden chair. Even earlier, a thousand years before Caxton and his printing press, the busy scholars of the great Liberty Library of Alexandria found that the number of parchments was much too great for them to handle, and now when we print more in a week than all the Alexandrian scholars could copy in a century, it could seem impossible that any production could be permanent, that any song or story could live to give delight in future ages, but literature is like a river in flood, which gradually purifies itself in two ways. The mind, the mud settles to the bottom and the scum rises to the top. When we examine the writings that by common consent constitute our literature, the clear stream purified of its dross, we find at least two more qualities which we call the test of literature and which determine its permanence. Test of literature. The first of these is universality, that is, the appeal to the widest human interest and the simplest human emotions. Though we speak of national and race literatures, like the Greek or Teutonic, and though each had certain superficial mass arising out of the peculiarities arising out of the peculiarities of its own people, It is nevertheless true that good literature knows no nationality, nor any bounds save those of humanity. It is occupied chiefly with elementary passions and emotions, love and hate, joy and sorrow, fear and faith, which are an essential part of our human nature. And the more it reflects these emotions, the more surely does it awaken a response in men of every race. Every father must respond to the parable of the prodigal son. Wherever men are heroic, they will acknowledge the mastery of Homer. Wherever a man thinks on the strange phenomena of evil in the world, he will find his own thoughts in the book of Job. In whatever place men love their children, their hearts must be stirred by the tragic sorrow of Oedipus and King Lear. All these are but shining examples of the law that only as a book or a little song appeals to universal human interest does it become permanent. The second test is a purely personal one and may be expressed in the indefinite word style. It is only in a mechanical sense that style is the adequate expression of thought, or the peculiar manner of expressing thought, or any other of the definitions that are found in the rhetorics. In a deeper sense, style is the man, that is, the unconscious expression of the writer's own personality. That is, the unconscious expression of the writer's own personality. It is the very soul of one man reflecting as in glass the thoughts and feelings of humanity. As no glass is colorless but tinges more or less deeply the reflection from its surface, so no author can interpret human life without unconsciously giving to it the native hue of his own soul. It is this intentionally permanent element that constitutes the style. Every permanent book has more or less of these two elements, the objective and the subjective, the universal and the personal, the deep thought and feeling of the race, reflected and colored by the writer's own life and experience. The object in studying literature, aside from the pleasure of reading, of entering into a new world and having our imagination quickened, the study of literature has one definite object, and that is to know man. Now, man is ever a dual creation. He has an outward and inner nature. He is not only a doer of deeds, but a dreamer of dreams, and to know him, the man of any age, we must search deeper than his history. History records his deeds, his outward acts largely, but every great act springs from an ideal, and to understand this, we must read his literature where we find his ideals recorded. When we read a history of the Anglo-Saxon, for instance, we learn that they were sea rovers, pirates, explorers, great eaters and drinkers. and we know something of their foibles and habits, and the land which they hurried and plundered. All that is interesting, but it does not tell us what must we want to know about these old ancestors of ours. Not only what they did, but what they thought and felt, how they looked on life and death, what they loved, that what they feared, what they reverenced in God and man. Then we turn from history to the literature which they themselves produced, and instantly we become acquainted. These hardy people were not simply fighters and freebooters. They were they were men like ourselves. Their emotions awaken instant response in the souls of their descendants. At the words of their gleemen, we thrill again to their wild love of freedom and the open sea. We grow tender at their love of home and patriotic at their deathless loyalty to their chief, whom they chose for themselves and hoisted on their shields in symbol of his leadership. Once more we grow respectful in the presence of pure womanhood or melancholy before the sorrows and problems of life, or humbly confident, looking up to the God whom they dare to call the All Father. All these and many more intentionally real emotion pass through our souls as we read the few things, the few shining fragments of verses that the jealous ages have left us. It is so with any age or people. To understand them, we must read only simple. We must read only. We must read not simply their history, which records their deeds, but their literature, which records the dreams that made their deeds possible. So Aristotle was profoundly right when he said that poetry is more serious and philosophical than history, and Goethe, when he explained literature as the humanization of the whole world, was the importance of literature in a curious and prevalent opinion that literature, like all art, is a mere play of imagination, pleasing enough like a new novel, but without any serious or practical importance. Nothing could be farther from the truth. Literature preserves the ideals of the people. Literature preserves the ideals of the people and ideals love, faith, duty, friendship, freedom, reverence are the part of human life most worthy of preservation. The Greeks were a marvelous people, yet of all their mighty works, we cherish only a few ideals, ideals of beauty, imperishable stone, and ideals of truth in imperishable prose and poetry. It was simply the ideals of the Greeks and Hebrews and Romans preserved in their literature, which made them what they were, and which determined their value to future generations. Our democracy, the worst of all English-speaking nation, is a dream. Not the doubtful and sometimes disheartening spectacles presented in our legislative halls, but the lovely and immortal ideal of a free and equal manhood, preserved as a most precious package in every great literature from the Greeks to the Anglo-Saxon, all our arts, our sciences, even our inventions are founded squarely upon ideals. For under every invention is still the dream of Yule, that man may overcome the forces of nature, and the foundation of all our sciences and discoveries is the immortal dream that man shall be as good, knowing good and evil. In a word, our whole civilization, our freedom, our progress, our homes, our religion, rest solidly upon ideals for their foundation. Nothing but an ideal ever endures upon earth. It is therefore impossible to overestimate the practical importance of literature, which preserves these ideals from fathers to sons, while men, cities, governments, civilization vanish from the face of the earth. It is only when we remember this that we appreciate the action of the devout Muslim, devout Musliman, who wakes up and carefully preserves every scrap of paper on which words are written, because the scrap may perchance contain the name of Allah, and the ideal is too enormously important to be neglected or lost. Summary of the subject: we are now ready, if not to define, at least to understand a little more clearly the object of our present study. Literature is the expression of life in words of truth and beauty. It is the written record of man's spirit, of his thoughts, emotions, aspirations. It is the history and the only history of the human soul. It is characterized by its artistry, its suggestive, its permanent quality. Its two tests are its universal interest and its personal style. Its object, aside from the delight it gives us, is to know man. That is the soul of man rather than his actions, and since it preserves to the race the ideal upon which all our civilization is founded, it is one of the most important and delightful subjects that can occupy the human mind. In its bibliography, not each chapter here includes a special bibliography of historical and literary works, selection before reading, chronology, and a general bibliography of text, helps, and reference books will be found at the end. General works, Woodbury's appreciation of literature, Baker and Taylor, Pogo, Baker and Taylor Company, Gates studies in appreciation, Macmillan, essays, Emerson book in Society and Solitude, Doden's The Interpretation of Literature in Transcripts and Studies, Criticism, Gary and Scott's An Introduction to the Methods and Materials of Literary Criticism, Poetry, Comrades, Handbook of Poetics, the drama, Cabbage Appreciation of the Drama, the novel, Release the English novel Scribner, Hamilton, The Materials and Methods of Fiction, Baker and Taylor Company. The Anglo-Saxon or Old English period 450 to 1050. Our first poetry, Duel. Here is the story of Duel, the earliest and the greatest epic or heroic poem in our literature. It begins with a prologue which is not an essential part of the story, but which we review gladly for the sake of the splendid poetical conception that produced Skyend, king of the spear, Plutus. At a time when the spear Danes were without a king, a ship came sailing into the harbor. It was filled with treasures and weapons of war, and in the midst of these warlike things was a baby sleeping. No man sailed the ship, it came of itself, bringing the child, whose name was Skylet. Now Skylet grew and became a mighty warrior, and led the spear Danes for many years, and was their king. When his son Jules had become strong and wise enough to rule, then violent fate who speaks but once to any man came and stood at hand, but it was time for Skylar to go. This is how they buried him. Then Skylar departed at word of Virid spoken, the hero to go to the home of the gods. Sadly, they warned him to bring of the ocean. Comrades still heeding his word of command, they rode in the harbor, the prince's ship ready, with prow coming proudly and shining sails set. Shipward they bore him, their hero beloved. The mighty they led at the foot of the mast. Treasurers were there from far and near gathered. Bindings of battle, armor and swords, never a need sailed out of the harbor, so splendidly tricked with the trappings of war. The Anglo-Saxon period. They heaped on his bosom a wad of bright jewels, to fare with him forth on the flood's great breast. No less gift they gave than the unknown provided. When alone as a child he came in from the mere, high over his head waved a bright golden standard. Now let the waves bear their wealth to the home. Sad salt they gave back its gift to the ocean. mournful their mood as he sailed out to sea. And no man, says the poet, neither counselor nor hero, can tell who received that lading. One of Strike's descendants was Hrothgar, king of the Danes, and with him the story of our Beowulf begins. Hrothgar, in his old age, had built near the sea a ruined hall called Herod, the most splendid hall in the whole world, where the king and his queens gathered nightly to feast and to listen to the songs of his women. One night, as they were all sleeping, a frightful monster, Grendel, broke into the hall, killed 30 of the sleeping warriors, and carried off their bodies to devour them in his lair under the sea. The appealing visit was speedily repeated, and fear and death resigned in the great hall. The warriors fought at first, but fled when they discovered that no weapon could harm the monster. Herod was left deserted and silent. For 12 winters, Grindel's horrible raids continued, and joy was changed to mourning among the spear dens. At last, the rumor of Grendel crossed over the sea to the land of the Medes, where a young hero dwelt in the house of his uncle, King Hazelek. Beowulf was his name, a man of immense strength and courage, and a mighty swimmer who had 12 days' powers fighting the knickers, whales, walruses, and seals in the ice-bound Northern Ocean. When he heard the story, Beowulf was started to go and fight the monster and free the Danes who were his father's friends. With 14 companions, he crosses the sea. There is an excellent bit of ocean poetry here. Two ten to fall, and we get a vivid idea of the hospitality of a brave people by following the poet's description of Beowulf's meeting with King Hrothgar and Queen Wellthorpe, and of the joy and fasting, feasting, and storytelling in Europe. The picture of wealth, the picture of value, passion, the maid cup to the warriors with her own hand, is a noble one, and plainly indicates the reference paid by these strong men to their wives and mothers. Night comes on, the fear of Grendel is again upon the Danes. I thank all my brothers and sisters, ladies and gentlemen, students, scholars, teachers, trainers, professor, professional, officer, official, listener, learner. I thank all the listeners. Thank you. Nice to see all of you. Thank you. Thank you. Thank you.